So I'm moving on to next speaker. Our next speaker is Prashant Kumar. He is the founding director of the Global Center for Clean Air Research at the University of Surrey and has the chair in air quality and health. His current research projects are focused in broad multidisciplinary areas of air pollution monitoring and modeling. Today, he's going to give us a talk on RAMP case studies, subgroup update around the schools, hospitals, trains, and etc. etc. So I'm over to you, Prashant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Let me share my screen now so I can do that. Fantastic. I hope you can see the screen now.
Yes, but it is not in the presentation. Oh, yes, it is. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, that's brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about some of the work we have been doing in this one of the subgroups, which is called case studies. This presentation will not really be the giving a lot of conclusions, but presenting some of the the development which has happened after from this this case study subgroup, and the work which is continuing with the number of projects in different environments. Talking about the schools, hospitals, and some of the macro environments like the trains and cars, and some of the work around the face mask. So I could not really put a lot of the results in there. Also, some of the things are sensitive from the kind of the business perspective. So I will start by thanking a number of colleagues actually who have been part of this subgroup, starting with Paul and Chris, and a number of researchers from my team from the different places. So there are not all of them listed here, but I would like to acknowledge actually their contributions in there. Just a very quick overview of this subgroup. So this subgroup, they consider the earlier topics, like you have seen number of talks around the aerosols, ventilation, the people movement, and so on. But what we're looking here was more holistic point of view in the real life kind of situations, working with the industrial partners. So there were almost around 55 members, and there was pretty good attendance, around 20 people attending almost each week, coming not only from the academics, but also from the businesses like the rail industry, Sainsbury's, Tesco, Arup, and in the local councils. And the focus was, the enclosed environments, and the scientific goal was in terms of understanding the science and challenges faced by the business industry related to the indoor air spread, but also related to this 1 meter, 2 meter kind of rules which keep coming and keep changing, the early stages, and setting up some scientific questions that could possibly be taken forward through the case studies. So when we started the subgroup, the airborne transmission was, in a very kind of early phases. And in fact, I remember some of the discussions in the very early, phases that a lot of colleagues were not even convinced that this could be, something very, substantial in future. But then suddenly, slowly the focus kind of, mostly gone into the airborne transmission, because the other routes like the formite transmission and others were kind of covered through the, through the other subgroups. And it was until July 2020, as you saw from Lydia's presentation yesterday, when this really came to acknowledge that this is an important route of transmission and which could really be considered in future. So when we were doing that, there were a lot of these questions came in, and some of them really reflect the early ages of the understanding, like how important is the airborne transmission. The smaller the particle, they can remain suspended. So this was kind of built upon the basic science of aerosol, that if the particles are carrying the virus and they are suspended in air, then they can really remain there for longer time and can contaminate others, even if the people are not there at that time when they are being released. Intensity of them, what can be done actually in these different places, which could include the spaces, restaurants, and so on. And then talking quite a lot about these 1 meter, 2 meter rules, the supermarkets, and what kind of experiments could be done to generalize the results in enclosed settings. So basically, if you see what I'm going to show you is a lot of them has built upon some of these basic questions which came out through this, through this case studies group, to answer them in one way or another. So I will start with the work which was awarded by the EPSRC, which is called the Coat Race Project, which is led by Professor Paul Linden and the colleagues from Imperial, Professor Keith Payne, Henry Burries, and myself are involved in this project, which is called, the idea there is that we are combining the field laboratory and modeling studies to develop techniques and tools to predict the risk of transmission in the school environments. And the idea there is to have, to produce easy to practical guidance, what Herschel was showing in his presentation, and equip a school and staff with the tools that can make the, the place safe and can take informed decisions. But there is quite a lot of issues in terms of the misunderstanding and sometimes, the busting the myths actually, in terms of, that one thing can work while that may not be, there may not be evidence actually to support it. So so some of the work on the monitoring side, which I'm kind of taking forward, is where we are doing this aerosol and the CO2, the monitoring across different places, and then colleagues in Imperial, they're looking into, some of these the CFD work. Utilizing this data. And there was this first kind of update from the project was released in terms of the CAST school. So thanks to Henry to take a lead on that, which is available, which talks about these classrooms and the schools. And the idea is that whatever we do, we try to simplify the complex science into simple messages and try updating these kind of the tools and the guidances in future. So one of the challenges when we started the work was that these school classrooms are quite different, and you could see that some of the classrooms could be having a very different ventilation settings, or the roofs actually could be low, medium, high. So I think it was quite challenging that how do we pick actually the relevant places to do the monitoring. So some of the work we have been doing is building upon the classroom typology in terms of classifying it into different categories and see if you can have some kind of systematic the understanding of it. So for example, if you think of a school, you can think that it could be a near road school and it could be away road school, and from the air quality perspective that makes a huge sense. Makes a difference basically, that what will be the impact of the outside air quality on the school. But then you can also classify that into the urban, the semi-urban and the rural. And then you can also think of whether you have a ground floor, you've got first floor, you've got second floor. So what we did is we are kind of combining these different type of the things and try to develop a kind of a matrix so that we can classify under which category our schools or our classrooms are kind of the falling into. So we have this T1, T2, T3, T4, T5. So these are kind of the categories depending on the ventilation, whether it's natural ventilation or it's a the mechanical ventilation and so on. And we got a simultaneous multi-point monitoring going on, where around 6 locations in each of these schools, and idea is to cover almost 100+ locations until summer, and then repeat it during the winters, so that we can capture actually the differences which is going on. So and then the plan there is to look into the micro scale multi-point monitoring in selected classrooms, so that we can have test actually the different intervention scenarios, like you might have seen some of the mentions of the purifiers, the screens, the desk arrangement and so on. So we can produce actually a fine scale mapping of the real, the real world kind of scenario that can help the CFD or the modeling tools in there. So One of the things which came out actually through this exercise, you can see quite a lot of this equipment being around there. So we also thought of using this low-cost setup. One of the challenges we saw that the best of the sensors which are available there, they could give a very different answers for the same conditions. So it can really confuse actually when you're starting comparing one classroom with another, where you might have the false actually the CO2 concentrations, because they might have a different the trade-off. So one of the things which is quite important is to have a very careful calibration of these equipment which has been put it in, so that the data is comparable. Otherwise that can really change actually the thinking in terms of what we are getting from the data itself. So this is just a plot actually to show the CO2 concentrations, but this was, you saw in the previous the presentation, that when you have the occupancy, you can see these towers going up, and these concentrations could almost touch almost around 1800 in this particular case, and going up to 1000 in some cases. And obviously when there is no occupancy, you will see that both the aerosol and the CO2 concentrations are low. But this is just the primary kind of the phase of the project. So we are still collecting and looking into the data and using some of the concept which has been presented earlier in terms of the rebate fraction, the probability, developing the risk, and then developing the scenarios which can provide actually the best the settings in terms of the ventilation and the reduced transmission. So you can hear more actually when we have more results in there. The other project is called the EPSRC Cove Air. This project is led by Professor Prashant from Imperial, and then a number of colleagues from Imperial, the Alex Porter, Ian Adcock, the Bhaskar, Chris Payne, and myself are involved in there. The idea of this project is a bit different actually. So one of the things is to understand what's happening in terms of these aerosols, when they are lingering in air, whether we can have the live COVID, the COVID virus onto them. So what we are doing is we are collecting, the samples on the filters, apart from the CO2 and the aerosol, the measurements in different places. And this is going through the PCR testing and the cell analysis and the microscopy to understand the virus aerosol interaction. So again, the project started in January itself, so it's very early stages of this. But one of the key things actually there was to also deploy a series of equipment which could allow actually collecting the filters, because you will see the literature is quite diverse. So, and these equipment are working on a very different principle. So we are deploying a series of them, what you can see in here, to see which of these techniques, what kind of filters are more effective in capturing, the live virus, and then that could possibly also simplify actually some of the methods, not only for the COVID, but also in future, for any the respiratory, the infections or the diseases in there. So so far we have been successful in getting samples in the hospitals, in the schools. And there are a number of others actually which are in radar, where it includes the pharmacy, museums, busy roadside, supermarkets, underground. And if people who are on this call, if they see that there are any interest in other enclosed spaces, I think we can always, we are open basically to consider those places in there as well. So to date, we have quite a lot of samples collected, but 24 of them were kind of tested, and the one of them found positive. This is kind of preliminary result, of course. It's the respiratory ward in one of the hospitals. So this work you will see more in future about that. But there was a review paper which we published earlier this year, which talks about these different methods of the collection of particles. So if you are interested to know more about these techniques, then you could possibly look into this paper that can allow you the further information on that. Some of the work was started as part of these discussions around the train, and then there is a project called TRACK where the Cambridge, Imperial, and Leeds are included in there, and we were contributing to the measurements in the train. So this was one of the very early experiments were carried out, where we have a train coach which was kind of standing, and we were trying to look into the ventilation off and ventilation on, the kind of the settings, and we kind of instrumented the coach actually with a number of these monitors, where we are monitoring the CO2 as well as the aerosols. So in this graph you are seeing the PM 2.5, which is the aerosol, the fine aerosols, and this red is basically where we are emitting, those as a source, actually mimicking that somebody is kind of exhaling, and then seeing how this is dispersing into different conditions. So obviously, when you have ventilation off, you could see the color is more towards red, actually. So the spread is more inhomogeneous. But when you have the ventilation on, then that can kind of reduce actually those things in there. But the people who are closest to the source actually can see there is a more the effect. So there was follow-up experiments on a moving train. So we are analyzing the data, but the data is quite sensitive at the moment. So I'm not really presenting anything here. And then there is a work, the corresponding work is done in terms of the modeling by the colleagues from Imperial and Cambridge and Leeds, in there. So again, there will be more possibly in the future work. So one of the interesting things which I've been also doing as part of my team is looking into the car environment, which is quite interesting because the government policy is that you should really avoid the public transport. So that means that if you are going far away from your town, you can't really walk or cycle, then the cars remains basically another important, the environment to commute. So this figures basically we did a number of these tests actually looking into the WC is the windows closed, air circulation from outside, so taking the air intake from outside, windows closed, the recirculation on, and then the third one is the windows open. So there is a very interesting trade-off in terms of the air quality, ventilation, and the transmission. So for example, if I look at the PM 2.5, which is the fine aerosols, so when you have the windows closed and recirculation, then you have all green basically. So what does this mean is that your concentrations are really low. So in terms of the air quality, you are safe actually if you are using the recirculation. And if you have the windows open, then you got an influence actually of the outside situations where you can have quite a lot of things coming inside your car. It means that the concentrations you will have is more as compared to this thing. And when you have the third setting, which is in between them, because you're taking the air intake, and you can also see some things outside, the emissions coming in. And the second one is almost giving a similar trend, which is for particle number concentrations. And the third one is CO2 actually, which is important to see. So you see that when you have the windows open, you got very high concentration, but you got very low CO2 because you are basically ventilating it. And when you have the recirculation, it means that you got really low concentration of pollution, but you got a very high, the concentration buildup of the CO2. So it means it creates kind of a, the trade-off, and according to the settings. And one of the things is that in the short term, of course, the COVID is really important, but in long term, when the COVID is gone, then the air pollution exposure becomes important. So what happens is when your CO2 is kind of decreasing, your aerosol is kind of increasing. And the question there would be then, can we find basically a the setting which can could be the best of the both worlds in a way. So we had quite a lot of data collected around the cars, and then we try to analyze and put it into a simple kind of format to see whether we can make sense of this data. So when you have the recirculation, you got the lowest concentration but very high CO2, so which is not really a setting which you definitely wanted to avoid actually when you're talking about the COVID transmission. But then these two settings, like the windows closed and taking the air intake from outside, or the windows open, they give you a pretty good, the ventilation in terms of the pollutant concentrations. You got the low concentrations, but also the CO2 buildup is relatively low if you consider the 1000 ppm as a kind of the guideline. If I look at the ASRE guidance, they say around 1000 ppm for the schools, but then they talk about 1100 for the cars actually. But of course, that's not considering the the infection. So the probability, if you convert that into the probability of transmission for almost about 2 hours of the speaking in normal the rates, so you got a very negligible transmission in the WO, which is the windows open and the windows the closed, as compared to when you are having the recirculation mode. So I think this is a quite interesting message. It's not new. We know that the windows open will work, but I think the quantification really helps actually in there. The last stream of work I would like to present is around the mask actually. So there is quite a lot of the debate in terms of these masks, that how long you should be wearing them, how effective they are. So some of the masks which are surgical and the medical grade, there is quite a lot of good literature, but there is not so much actually on the handmade mask. And the handmade mask actually is a problem in a way, because they are being built without considering the proper consideration of the efficiency or the breathing resistance. So what we were trying to do there is try to build an inventory of the mask in terms of understanding how the breathing resistance of this mask changes as a function of time, and what could be the usage time. When should I really be throwing my mask? You might have seen a lot of these messages, the news items where the people are complaining about these masks which are stuck with the wildlife and so on. So I think it becomes quite important to understand that thing. So most of the masks usually they work on the three principles. The one you have the inner layer, which is hydrophobic, and the outer layer is hydrophobic, and in the middle you got a filtering layer. So we developed a setup in my lab where we can simultaneously measure the size distribution of the particles starting from 5 nanometers going up to 10 micron, and can also measure actually the pressure difference between these between these things. So this setup is there. We have been we have been doing these testings for a while, and as you can see actually these they show so this is kind of a penetration efficiency. So if you reduce 100 minus this, that will give you the kind of how much is being retained by these masks. So they're giving almost 59% of the efficiency when it comes to the particle number concentration, and the pressure drop increases as a function of time. So if I combine these together, that gives a really interesting scenario. So what you could see is efficiency versus the breathing resistance at a time. So what happens is that when you use the mask, so as you use, your efficiency goes down and your breathing resistance will keep going up basically. And there will be a point actually which will cross over, and that crossover could reflect somehow the usage time, because that will be the time when your efficiency will be low and the pressure will be high. But then there is another thing comes in picture. So this doesn't really go well actually when we talk about these handmade masks. So the thing is that even if your mask is efficient, if your breathing resistance is more than 4 times of the initial pressure, so that means that you'll not be able to use the mask. So in a way, you can have a usage time of a mask based on the breathing resistance. So what we have been doing is then we're trying to do the similar thing on different type of masks. So this is the mask FFP1, which really follows.
1 minute.
Yeah. So this really follows what I was telling about. But when we talk about this handmade mask, actually this principle really doesn't work. So you need to think about what would be the usage time of this mask, and what would be the criteria which will be most important to consider in terms of the efficiency or the breathing resistance. So so I think this is my last slide basically. So, and this I showed in the previous the things in there as well, where the government built space and public, that remains important, and this is still really important. It will remain important in future when we're talking to the respiratory infection. But what is really critical and what has been a great progress in this particular area is the database. And this database, gathering the aerosols, the CO2, the air exchange rates, and I think this is allowing basically the bespoke guidance for these different spaces. And this is something which is quite powerful to support actually the modeling and the other the policy interventions. So I think with that, I would like to thank again all my team and all the contributors who have been contributing to this case study subgroup. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prashant, giving us a excellent presentation. It is very informative and lots excellent work done. I looked at the Q&A box. There is no question so far, and our time is slightly over. So